Hello.
You should do.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, so I'm a GIS analyst at the County of Grand Prairie, and we did a deep dive into the address ranging fields as based on the NINA standards. So it seemed like a good topic for this AGM. So I'll just be talking about the process we went through to measure the problem of how non-standardized our addresses are. So I will be talking about, very briefly, since it's rather self-explanatory, why are standard addresses important? What are some tools for standardizing addresses, and how do we use these tools, and what next? So the motivator for all of this is the why, what, and how of the address ranging fields, and shine a light on that. So why are standardized addresses important? You can go to the next slide. So again, I mean, if you don't have standardized addresses, you have a huge amount of frustrated users, as we've just gone into, about people accessing AMDSP data, people using Google, people using AHS, people using internal staff, everybody is annoyed. So if you just go to the next slide. Yeah, have accurate data, then yeah, better service delivery, better communication. Your integrations team is going to seriously thank you. And emergency response will be what people expect it to be. So next slide. So some at a high level, some basic tools would be your addressing grids and the address ranging fields. So if we go to the next slide, the rural addressing grid is created using your road allowances and your ATS grid, and the 40-meter spacing. And so yeah, even on the northwest side, out on the southeast, you guys probably all know this, but it's actually not that complicated. And then yeah, 0 to 100 are the numbers. Next slide.
Just can I butt in, if that's okay?
Yes.
If you go one slide back, because I've looked at this too. Some of these roads are not purely northwest or southeast. You always have exceptions that wind a little. How do you deal with that, with those roads? What do you decide then for the numbering?
Well, I did make a workbench for that. I just will add up the post numbers and take the even ones to make a list, and take the odd ones to make a list, and that way you don't have to calculate angles of roads. But yeah, no, this grid does require a huge amount of customization. So it's
I mean, it's ideal when it's like a pure grid, right? But
yeah,
Claire, can I interrupt?
for sure.
So
Because this is actually done.
I know. So you have our stuff down later on with the non-standard. Did Don give you the non-standards? How we do the non-standards?
Well, you have it's customized, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you have that in there? Otherwise, I can talk about it.
Yeah,
Well, I
I
will
think
get
just,
there. They talk about it in 2 more slides.
Okay.
Oh.
No, I'll shut up.
Okay. No, just
I got a big.
we will get into that. Then the civic road naming grid is a little bit different because it's not divided up by a grid. It's just the idealized road names. So yeah, we know all that. We can go to the next one. So the grids are used. They should be used when new subdivisions are developed, and should be checked when developers come back with addresses. And this is where the counties run into issues, because no one's been using grids and nothing matches. So yeah. And this would be, yeah, the nothing matches. You have to customize the grids. Doug, you had some thoughts?
Oh, so we have because the grid's not matching. So what we've done is we went and looked at a road that wanders around. So it's often named roads. They're out in our foothills. And so what we've done is we've looked at the road. Okay, it's a township road. It's going to have township numbering all the way through. And we've created grid lines, station lines along them. at 40-meter intervals and then numbered all those station lines. So they do exceed over 100 on some of them, and then they have a reset every time they hit one of the grids. So they will reset again. It's the next grid run. So so we'll get numbers up to like 128 due to that, but maybe a little bit higher. But it makes it easier for the resident to drive along that road, and the numbers all just keep increasing.
Yes,
So, a bit more work, but functionally from a routing, it doesn't produce any better data, but it produces data that's better for people to understand.
And for response, right?
Well, it helps the response too. Well, like they do have digital stuff, which helps tell them where to go, but it doesn't always work. As we all know, but that way they can go down the road and follow.
Yeah, like the main problem with the grid is it's not reality. Reality is very complicated. So we can try to get as close as we can from a lane perspective. It's you want 100% addressed, standardized address data set. We'll just get as close to it as we can. So next slide. Yeah, so then the address ranging fields, why are they in the NINA standard? Do we have to fill them out? So these are just your lowest house number and highest house numbers that you can have along a road segment. Yeah, PSAPs use these to find houses when you don't have an address. So they do have value that way. Currently, AHS is populating these fields, and when it becomes the responsibility of the municipality, they will have to too. It's not as hard though. It's not really hard to do. Next slide. The geocoding is also a very popular use of the address ranges. It provides a location and address by matching the address to an address range. What's the next slide? The fields are just populated, as you can see, just not by lowest and highest house number, but just by all the possible number range. So 1 to 99 or 0 to 98, and so yeah, you just can populate that way. Next slide. Yeah, so AHS is currently doing the address ranging for 911, and these fields are in the NINA standard, so it's forecasted to be part of the next gen 911 system. Next slide. Next slide. Now, so in order to use addresses to populate the minimum and maximum house numbers in the address ranging fields in the addressing grids, so that the addressing grids can be used to generate new addresses with auto incrementing house numbers as a QA/QC method for existing data and the new addresses. Next slide. Yeah, so it's not that hard to do. And this way, yeah, you can create addresses for new points. Next slide. Yeah, how do we use these tools? So how do they all tie in together? Because at the county, we're currently working on a data strategy, and part of that is creating finding data ownership and creating ways to check the data. So, and to measure the extent of the problem. So there's three parts to this formula: addresses, addressing grids, and the address range fields. And then you can use FME or data reviewer, or just manual checking, topology, all sorts of fun things. Next slide. Yeah, so the site addresses are used to find errors. The site addresses use address ranging to find errors in the site addresses. The addressing grid uses the address ranging in the network to find errors, to find roads with incorrect addresses. And then the site addresses are used to update the addressing grids, and then the addressing grids are used to geocode new site addresses. That's how it all fits together. Next slide. The PSAP in the county is not going to be using Next Gen 911 until 2027, so we have quite some time to clean up the data. However, a lot of it's going to involve readdressing projects that might take ages to complete. So yeah, we have to finalize our addressing guidelines document, and that has to just be gold stamped. And then update the civic road naming grid and create a rural addressing grid, populate and address range fields. And find out, make a plan and then create QA/QC documents and actually follow them. So yes, this was treated as a research project of the NENA standard address ranging fields. So yeah, and then it would probably make a really good lead project. Any questions? Yeah.
Your FME workbench, is that correct that you just drop all the points, the address points onto the map and then it would fill up, get a correct address?
Yeah, like, yeah, it looks for all the addresses close to a road that have the same road name. And then it takes all the even numbers and makes a list from that, and odd numbers makes a list from that. Then it extracts the minimum, maximum, and that way you don't have to deal with road geometries. And that's a rabbit hole.
Is there a benefit of sharing them, or like, do the,
Oh, yeah, no, this will all be part of the materials that are released after this, after today.
like, we have our own workbenches, but it's not that idea to.
Yeah, no, well, what the thing is, we, with the new system that's being created, it's using FME. We're hoping to just use FME as much as possible, and so we will have open workbenches that people can develop or look at. So it's, and I have automation using FME servers, so it will all be very transparent.
The key,
Oh,
sorry,
yeah,
the key thing is to actually come up with a strategy for doing the address, like something that's going to work, particularly for the rurals, because it's such a much more difficult problem than the urban setting. In the urban setting, it's much more cut and dried. But the rural with these long meandering roads that there is no real easy way of addressing. So just a question is if you create the address ranges based upon addresses that are existing, you won't necessarily get the full hypothetical or potential set of address ranges for any given road segment.
So the way I interpreted the best practice is that you have the full hypothetical address range in the road network, and then you have the existing house numbers from lowest to highest in the addressing grids that's used for the geocoding portion of it. So
if you go through the effort of creating grids for all of your public roads, then this kind of process can be used to then associate those distinct address points, as it were, to the actual road segments.
Yeah, so there's three parts: the addressing grids, the addresses, and the address ranging fields in the road network. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh,
Thanks
I
for,
have another question.
okay.
What if there's currently addresses that are not standard according to like the standard? Do they have to be changed then, or?
Plans should be made for a addressing project, but I mean, as GIS analysts, you can't say thou shalt readdress the subdivision.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But that's the problem, right? I mean, Because then if you do like an FME workbench like that, it will generate like completely different addresses on your roads than I think your address points.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in the lean
Just
approach, you measure the extent of the problem and then you make a plan to, based on that, and, you know, if you're objective, so this would be measuring the amount of, you know, addresses that you have that are not standardized. And then you can go about, then you are able to, you know, start convincing people and discussing what's going to be done about it.
It's one of the dirty data issues that just is going to be ongoing for each municipality. The new system that we're putting in place will actually give you more tools that will actually identify issues like that. So for example, if you have an address, civic address point, and it is nowhere near the road. So if the address says that it's on 123 Green Street, and there is no Green Street, maybe there's no Green Street in your entire municipality. It's going to flag that and say, you know, this doesn't actually have a corresponding road to relate to. So that's either going to identify an error, and maybe somebody put Green Street on it. It should have been Green Avenue. So, oh, it's caught something. Good. Or maybe it is 123 Green Street is the actual address. But it's just one of these nonsense addresses. There isn't a Green Street, but hey, that's the address for this house. And is somebody going to fix it at some point? Well, then that becomes more of almost a political situation where
It's not the GIS department, so maybe planning or I don't know who.
Yeah, it depends where that responsibility lies. Ultimately, I mean, is it a safety issue? Is it a, you know, public safety issue?
It will be a safety issue.
Because you want,
nobody external can find an address like
you
that.
want the ducks to line up, right? It's always best when the address makes sense. The resident knows what the address is. The occupant of the building knows their address. They phone in. The responder knows that same the dispatch knows the same address. AHS has it. The people in the vehicle have it. If those ducks all line up and they can route to that point, they're gonna get there while the body's warm.
I would suggest that if there's a mess in an area, at the very least GIS comes up with the solution and the addressing, whether or not they're the responsibility on making the changes and getting the buy-in and doing all the communication is another thing. And that could always be another department, but because if you want to get it completely, depending on if you assign it to a non-GIS area, they may not actually fix it all.
Yeah. Yeah, like usually what I do is I give them the best case scenario, like this is the absolute proper way of doing it. And then we have a conversation, well, if we actually do it the proper way, is that going to cause any issues, right? So if the door is facing First Street to First Avenue, we change that address to First Avenue, who lives there? Is it an elderly couple in their 80s and they're not going to be able to change? Remember that their address has changed. Is it a business that has it on their website and their business cards? Like sometimes it's easier to make those changes and sometimes it's more difficult. And so going the absolute correct way can actually cause more issues than it solves. And so it's kind of a case by case basis.
No, you got a couple questions over to you want to talk?
Oh, okay. County Wetaskiwin, how do you address parcels on forced roads? Yeah, this is something that Doug was referring to. What we did in Willow Creek was we used the numbers based on the grid. And so initially you have to determine whether the road is a township road, is more in the direction of a township road or more in the direction of range road. So you make that assessment. It's like, well, are we going to use the numbering from range roads or we're going to use the number from township roads? Once you've made that determination, because some of them, they meander, they even go back on themselves. So you make that initial assessment and then just using the grid, you've at least got a starting point every time it crosses. to reset to the next grid number every quarter mile. And so that's the tack that we used in Willow Creek. Now, what works best in your municipality?
Well, yeah, very similar to that. We are just doing an addressing guidelines document now, so that's addressing all those issues.
Claire, will you share that with everybody?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was a very good idea.
And then
Maybe if we reach out to our partnership, that may be a really good takeaway, is reach out to our partner, see how many municipalities we could get together with their guidelines. And we could do a bit of a comparison, maybe just help kind of present where we're headed in different directions. At least to give you a list of kind of options.
And then the data gets fixed when you're before doing the upload. Not erroring out after the upload, which is ideal. I believe the county of Grand Prairie uses municipal addresses for mailing addresses. If you're discovering incorrect addresses, making those changes, how has that process been with Canada Post and the residents? Well, again, yes, the mail out, so not perfect.
does Canada Post use your civic addresses for their mailboxes in
No,
Grand Prairie? Or you
no,
still have?
Canada Post has a separate, I will look into that and give you a more detailed answer.
The county of Red Deer, they went through, or they were subjected to Canada Post's program of changing things from rural routes and post office box numbers. So that everybody that had a post office box actually got, they no longer use their post office box as their address, as their mailing address. They use their actual rural civically assigned address that relates to that box. So that box was just a physical container for their house, which might be 30 miles away in the woods. The big thing that Canada Post was doing in that circumstance was their procedure is that they canvass each homeowner or each home occupant to tell Canada Post what their address is. And that's what Canada Post was using. And it created an absolute nightmare because half the residents didn't know what their address was, their civic address, because they're rural. They don't really care. But this created a massive amount of confusion. So I don't know if Canada Post has kind of figured out, well, maybe we should talk to the county. I mean, that's what they should have done, was talk to the county, get the actual address for every given resident, and then have the resident correlate that to their post office box. So it was badly handled. So hopefully they're learning their lessons along the way, because this is a program. I don't know how aggressive the rollout is of this thing of changing from post office boxes to civic addresses. But it could happen in your municipality, particularly if you're a rural.
They do have priority areas they've identified, but they identified for us. And so when they started doing the Indian Tabor, they did exactly that. They moved from every quarter section of land was identified as having a signed box. They were running out of boxes and they decided they needed to go to a different model. Now you have to prove that you have a resident at the municipal address. Once they prove that to them, they assign a mailbox to you with that address. So they're using the municipal addressing, and then they have limited number of mailboxes. So that's their way, right? So now instead of just saying, we have 56 townships with how many quarters, that's how many mailboxes, which is quite a large quantity, and probably not a realistic representation for you or how many people live out in the municipality. So then they've assigned that many boxes.
Interesting. Yeah, the only story I've ever really heard was Red Deer, but if they're doing it in other municipalities.
From what I understand, it's all they jump it wherever their priorities are is where they're jumping. It's not like a moving across the whole province approach.
So we have a good news story from Foothills County. Because Canada Post in Foothills now uses the civic addresses provided by Foothills County. The first round, they used the addresses from the ratepayer, and that resulted in a difficult experience for all involved. Well, no kidding.
Yeah, well, we're doing a census, so that would be ideal. We do a census and provide that data to Canada Post.
Yeah.
Okay, so are there any more questions?
I was gonna make a comment about the Canada Post. In our experience, it was actually really smooth.
Really?
Yeah, that might sound surprising. They took our address and that was,
Wow.
they didn't canvas residents, they didn't ask for, create that conflict, what I think my address is, versus what it is.
Wonderful.
There were areas where the address maybe didn't make sense, and like someone alluded to, where we just had to make an acceptance, saying, well, what we know it's not right, or as right as it could be. And so we accepted the old one, we just changing the cause more problem and so on.
Yeah.
I still find that maybe we find errors. Now changing it has a bigger impact with the cannibals, legalities and all that stuff, but if they don't want to accept this, otherwise they have to be everything. I think, PLA factor. So, but ours has been very good.
Oh, good.
And most people, once they accepted it, they're very happy with it. It's made their life easier in a lot of ways.
Well, obviously they're learning from their troubles of the past, which is wonderful. And that might explain why they download our data so often.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. She's been participating and contributing significantly, and we appreciate that. Thank you to her for her time and to Miss Fowler for the commitment. And so, yeah, it's been great, and bringing that technical expertise as well has been wonderful, and I think we've learned a lot from you as well. So appreciate that. Okay. 1 o'clock, so what is our, do we have any other questions on this?
All right, we have a little extra time, but we can
Do you want to take 15 minutes and then we'll
bio break.
yeah, take a little 15-minute break and grab a coffee and take a little bio break, and then we'll come back and we'll continue with our agenda. And we'll just mute, Dawn, if you want to mute the meeting, we'll just keep the meeting running, and we'll just mute the meeting while we just take a few minutes. So thank you.
Thank you.